Hi, in this video let me demonstrate functions. So I want to show you how to write a function with no parameter, input parameter, a single input parameter, multiple input parameters, and return values. Okay, 4 different functions. So we are going to write 4 different functions. Remember, we have to write static, especially when we write functions in a console application. If you don't write static, then you have to declare an object and then like call this method as part of that object, and we don't want to go there. Next week we'll be looking at object-oriented programming, especially like new classes and everything, and after that you can try this out. So for now I'm going to write add. That's my first method. Okay, so I'm just writing like 2. This is an easy example so you can follow along pretty easily. So here you can see okay, so this first method is called as print. Okay, this print method is going to say hello. Okay, anytime you call this method, it is going to say hello. So because it is printing already, it doesn't have to return any value back to the calling function. That is why it is a void type. And it doesn't care about the input because it's always going to say hello. Okay, so for example, from here, if I call print, how many ever times I call print, it will say the same thing. So it says hello, hello, hello. So let me take this one out. Okay, because it doesn't care about changing the message. The message is hard-coded and it is not returning anything back to this place. Always it is just saying hello. So that is called as a function that takes no input and returns no output. No input, no return value. Then we have the next function called add. This one needs to know the numbers it needs to add. Okay, so you have to say what numbers need to be added. So when you call add, you have to say number 1, number 2. Okay, and then here it's going to say number 1 plus number 2, and then it's going to store it in a variable called sum. And then this method returns sum. It returns the value sum, which means here you can say int total equal to, and you can capture what is being sent here. You can capture in a variable and then you can show that value. So now see, so this guy said hello no matter what my input is. It's not even taking input, and this guy took our inputs 1 and 6, 1 and 5 and added it. So if I repeat this method, but then I gave a different set of numbers, 10 and 51. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't keep saying int total. Okay, I just want to like, because I'm reusing it, I don't want to keep declaring it, right? That's the error I'm getting. There. See, first time it's 6, next time it's 61, because the value input parameters are changing. That is what makes this reusable. We made it like a plug and play. We are saying, hey, you can do whatever you want as long as you use the numbers I'm giving you. And then please tell me what is the answer. And that is what we are capturing here. So this is where we have input. So the input doesn't have to be a single input. You can have multiple inputs. Okay. when you are doing the function definition and you have input parameters, you have to say what type of parameter and what variable you're going to catch it in. Okay, so if you change this to double, no, let us say you make it string, you're going to get an error now. See, it says like I don't see anything that is taking integer and string. What is going on? Okay, so make sure that what you're passing matches what you're defining here. Here you have a certain intent saying I want to add two numbers, my inputs will be both be integers, and here you are only sending integers, so all is good. Okay, so here's the funny part. Let us see, we have these two numbers and then I have a method here. So whatever, multiply. Let us say I have a method called multiply, it takes only one number. So what it will do is equal to number times number. It multiplies number with number. Okay, and then it changes number equal to product. It multiplies itself and then saves it back to itself. Okay, so now we can do a console dot write line. Now there's a reason for this madness, believe me. Okay, it is doing some manipulations on this input parameter we sent. Okay, the input parameter is going to be multiply and I am sending x. So this is the function. I'm sending x inside. I want to know if x gets changed or not. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. Result of multiply. Okay. Oh, this one. Okay, see here. So the num takes 10 as the input because x is 10. So 10 times 10 becomes 100 and it goes into product. Then I am rewriting num with product, which means num becomes 100. So I am writing result of the multiply method num is 100. Okay, but even though I sent x as an input parameter, that does not get affected. That's the point I wanted to make. Just because you are sending this as an input to multiply, it does not change the value of x. Just because you change num, it does not affect x. X gets copied to none. So a copy is made, the original is not affected. So num is a copy, x is the original. Okay, so this is called as passing by value. We are sending input by value. Okay, so when you send an input, by default in C# you don't modify it. There are some exceptions to it where you will modify. By default you will not modify the input. Okay, the input will remain as is. A copy of this x will be made here inside num. It will be stored in a variable called num. Even if this name is x, it doesn't matter, it will still not be affected. It will only make a copy for multiply, the method multiply, and it will keep it in the memory. Okay, just because we changed num, it does not affect x. That is called pass input by value. But instead, let's try this one out. Let me actually clear it. What we can do is we are going to create another. This is going, we'll leave it alone. We'll make a copy of this guy and call it as multiply by ref. Okay. So like I said, you have to pass value by reference where the value will change. So instead of saying integer number, you will say ref integer number. By this, you're saying, I don't care, don't make a copy. Don't make a copy. This reference means don't make a copy, use the original. Okay. So when I call the same thing here for multiply by reference, here also I have to say don't make a copy. So the ref keyword is mainly saying don't make a copy, use the original. Okay. See, in this case, in this situation, let's forget that guy. In this situation, when I call multiply, multiply is a method that does just says integer number is the input. Okay, so there is no ref keyword. There is no ref keyword means always by default in C#, it is going to make a copy of the number that's passed. X is 10. So our number 10 is copied to a new variable called num. Okay, and that is why no matter what you do to num here, X, the value in X is preserved. Okay, but here we are saying don't make a copy. By saying a ref, you are saying don't make a copy, and here you are saying don't make a copy, which means it is going to like change the value. If you change num, it is going to change the value of X. So let's see. See the first one, num is 100, but X is 10. Second one, num is 100, X is 100. So the input parameter, because we are passing it as reference, any changes to it will affect the variable even though it is outside of the scope. Okay, so passing by value versus passing by reference, other than like complex objects, usually what you send here will never get affected because of the processing inside the method. Okay, you have to intentionally say ref in both areas. Okay, so that's passing by reference. So we saw with 0 parameters, 0 return value. We saw with input parameters and return value. So for example, if you don't have this return value, but then you have a return type, you will get an error. See, it is saying add not all code paths return a value. So if you say this add has a return value integer, you better return something that's an integer. Okay, so functions improve the clarity, really improve the clarity of your code. It makes it much more reusable, and it modularizes your code. This is a good segue into the next chapter that we will look at, where we will deep dive into object-oriented programming, and that consists mainly of properties and methods. So this will really help you understand or ease into object-oriented programming that we will go over next week. So remember, a method or function, whatever you call it, is just like a chunk of code with a name to it. And so we have a name, so we can call it anytime. When you call it, to make it even more customizable, you can make some changes to the code like changing the input parameters. Okay, you can define some part of your code variable. Like for example, we are not always adding the same numbers. We are like giving the functionality so the user can tell us what numbers they want. When you call the function, you can give the number so it can add and return the value for you. Okay. Or you could write a method that takes no input parameters and returns no output parameters. Okay, that is okay too. So that is where you use the void keyword, void. Okay, void means no return value. In a console application, you always make sure that you add the static keyword for all your methods. Otherwise, you will have to declare an object and then call the and then you may be able to call the method. So we don't want to go into it right now because it's we have not looked at classes yet. So in this one, we are just having a regular method that does not return any value, void. Public means it can be accessed by anyone. Static means you can call it without having an object. Void is the return type. There is no return statement. That is why you are saying void. And then it has one input parameter. This is to demonstrate when you change the value of the input parameter, it does not change the input parameter that was passed. This x, even though it maps to num, a copy is made. Okay, so because a copy is made, that is why you call pass by value. You are only sending the value, but a copy is made, like a photocopy is made, and then that is the version they work with here inside this method. So changing this input parameter does not affect your main variable. But in this case, we specifically are saying, hey, don't bother. I want you to change the input for me. If num changes, x should change. And that is where we say reference. Ref. If you use the keyword ref before, you have to use it in both places. When you do that, you are no longer preserving the value of the input parameter. If it changes inside this program, that's the way it will be. Okay, hope these videos are helpful and they give you some idea about like what functions and methods are, and we will see them in more detail when we go into object-oriented programming.